Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. Climate change is an issue that affects us all and was the focus of the COP26 that wrapped up this week in Glasgow, while at the same time, king tide flooding gave Charleston a preview of how sea level rise will change the area. We talked with Dr. Lori Zokowski from the University of South Carolina on how climate change is affecting the state. But first, with the passage of President Joe Biden's bipartisan infrastructure bill, what does it mean for South Carolina? House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn joins us now. Congressman Jim Clyburn, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Congressman, let's talk about this $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that sends money to all the states, including South Carolina, to fix roads, bridges, broadband, ports, airports. South Carolina is receiving about $6 billion over the next 5 years as a result. Why was this bill so important in getting passed?
Well, I think that the American people have been crying out for infrastructure fixes for a long, long time. Here in South Carolina, thousands of bridges have been determined to be substandard. We have had a big problem trying to get our port deep enough and wide enough for ships to go to and fro so that we can get all these automobiles and automobile tires and other things that we're making in this state, to get them out of here. We have been hearing talk about the poisonous water tables that we have, most especially in the low country, the flooding that takes place all over Charleston. If you visit Charleston when it's raining, you want help if you can't get a boat down the middle of the street. So these things have been going on for a long, long time. Then we had a president prior to this one who every week talked about infrastructure week, infrastructure month. And people had all those pin-up expectations that were dashed time and time again. And so President Biden ran on getting this done. And he has now gotten it done. And I'm glad that we are talking about what's in this bill, because I'm still hearing from people about what we have not done. You know, John West, when I was on his staff, John West and I had a discussion one time, and during that discussion, he referred to a glass of water glass that was on his desk, and he asked me to take note of it. When I did, he said, that glass is half full of water. Because of your experiences, and you look at it, it's half empty. Because of my experiences, it's half full. And we always got to work on filling up the glass. And so I think about that often. And when people tell me about what did not get in the bill, I tell them, let's spend a little time talking about what did get in the bill. $65 billion for broadband. How big is a broadband problem in South Carolina? How many South Carolina kids lost a year of school, some more than a year, because they were not connected to the internet and couldn't continue their education during COVID-19? How many patients in hospitals could not get telehealth and telemedicine? I know what it is to watch a spouse battle diabetes and need telehealth. And because we had good insurance, she had it. So these things are big in our state. And I would hope that we will stop talking about the things that we have not gotten done yet. And like you're doing here today, let's talk about the things that are in this bill.
Well, then, Congressman, you pair that with what we saw passed with the American Rescue Plan money, too, and that has a lot of discretionary funds in there, too, for the legislature to approve, and it sounds like a lot of those will be going towards infrastructure, will be going towards broadband, too. So you have a lot of potential here. What does that mean for South Carolina?
That means Joe Biden has been great for South Carolina. The American Rescue Plan is Joe Biden's plan, and this is Joe Biden's plan. And we've got another Joe Biden plan on the horizon. And it means that we can now get malfunction junction fixed here in South Carolina, here in the Midlands of South Carolina. It means that the flooding all over Charleston that they're still complaining about, we can now address the flooding. Mm-hmm. It means our children can get online learning, our senior citizens, and our rural hospitals. 4 rural hospitals we closed in South Carolina, and many experts tell me that if these hospitals could be connected to the teaching hospitals via the internet, they might still be open. Mm-hmm. And so these are very important things that we ought to concentrate on doing. Now, I don't understand why people think that we can build highways and fix bridges and do water systems by clipping coupons out the Sunday papers. That ain't going to happen. Mm-hmm. Well, we've got to have massive commitment of federal dollars to get this done. You can't even do it with state money a lot. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought up the rescue plan, because the governor, McMaster, told me just before he did the state address this year, which was just after January 6th, he told me that he was getting ready to request some of the CARES money to be allocated by the state for broadband. And now I'm told that our share, South Carolina's share of this $65 billion is going to be enough to build out 100% of our broadband needs in South Carolina. But when you take the money from the CARES package, you take the money from the rescue plan, you take the money from the FCC's rural digital program, you will, and the money from this one, it adds up to the neighborhood of $600 million, and South Carolina says that we can build out 100% of broadband with right under $600 million. And, so in the next 46 years, if we spend the money wisely, it's one thing for the money to get allocated, and something else for us to spend it wisely. If we spend this money wisely, South Carolina can show the way in broadband deployment. And we've got a good first step, because we have the best maps. The mapping for South Carolina already done. Jim Switzinger, however you pronounce that last name, has done a great job. I brought him up to Washington to meet with legislators from 30 other states. 30 other legislators from various rural states. He came up and he's gone out to help many of those states do their mapping. So South Carolina can do for broadband what it did for educational television.
Nice
in the
plug
Fritz
there.
Hollis days. Absolutely.
We appreciate
South
that.
Carolina led the way in educational TV.
Sure did.
And so we can do the same thing with broadband.
And I just want to jump.
Thanks to ET towers, those towers you guys put up, we have been using those towers to get broadband into places like Allendale County.
And sorry, I just want to jump in and move on. I know we have so much to talk about, but I know Jim, we did talk to him. Sure. He did say that was about a $90 million problem, maybe upwards of $600 million for that broadband that they are working to get rolled out. And now you're saying that we're going to pretty much effectively fix this problem with all this funding going forward. But I want to ask you also about just why it took so long for this bill to get passed. You know, we saw it pass in August. We even saw 19 Republican senators join in to pass it, including Senator Lindsey Graham. But then it pretty much, there was so much back and forth in the House. Then we saw what happened in Virginia with the governor's race there too. And then just days later, after that election day, we saw this get passed. How much of a role do you think that Virginia race kind of played in spurring action in the House for Democrats?
Well, let me tell you about the House of Representatives. There are 435 people in that House. I come from one congressional district. I'm the only one in the House that voted for it in South Carolina. Think about that. We got 7 members of the House. 1 voted for it. The other 6 voted against it. Maybe they don't think it's important. So that's the kind of problem we have. You ask me why it was so difficult? You have to ask those 6 people. Why it's so difficult for them to want to fix the bridges? Why it's so difficult for them to want to put in water systems? Why they don't want people to have broadband? They voted no. That's why it's so difficult. Only 13 of the 109 some odd Republicans voted for this bill, and now they're talking about punishing the 13 people who voted for it.
But then, of course, you have a majority in the House, too, and you had 6 Democrats who didn't vote for the bill, too. So there's a lot of infighting there as well.
Well, remember, those 6 Democrats, if you look at their district, you look at what they had to say about it, those 6 people got very upset because they wanted us to vote on Build Back Better first. Because they didn't trust the moderates to be there for Build Back Better if we voted on their bill first. Now, I took the bull by the horns because I'm a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. I don't know why, but I am a member. And so I got them, the Congressional Black Caucus, to step out of their comfort zone. They wanted that bill to be voted on first also. I got them to step back from that. And I got the moderates to step up to a commitment on Build Back Better. And that's how we passed it. But those 6 people still did not trust. And if you look at the records, that's why 6 of them voted against it, because they thought, and you remember, we've been talking about voting on that bill first and then vote on the other bill. We reversed that, and they didn't like that, and I understand that.
But going back to Virginia, do you think Virginia played a big role in spurring a lot of this too? I mean, you saw that blowout in Virginia. Was that a wake-up call? I mean, before the election, you were even saying that Democrats didn't even see that it's not clear if they have developed the will to win in 2022. So do you think now that Democrats have passed this, maybe that things have changed?
Well, I don't know that things have changed. When I said that Democrats had not developed the will, you may remember I also said, when I was asked what they have to do to develop the will, I said they have to get outside of their comfort zones. That's what I said, and that's what I meant, and that's what they did. The Black Caucus got beyond its comfort zone. The moderates got beyond their comfort zone. We found common ground, each group giving up something. And that's how we got here. Now, could we have done that earlier? I guess we could have. Let me put it this way. We should have done that earlier.
Would it have made a difference in Virginia?
We could not do it earlier. I'm sorry?
Would it have made a difference in Virginia, do you think?
I don't think it would have made a difference in the outcome of the election, because I don't think the election turned on that. If you look at it, fully 25% of the people in Virginia said they voted solely on another big lie. They voted on a big lie. There's something called racial something.
Critical race theory, yes.
Yes, that's a theory. No high school teaches that. I used to teach. Nobody teaches that stuff. We history teachers, we teach facts. We don't teach theory. Those are college labs where theory is taught. And over 25% of Virginians said they voted primarily on that issue. And if that's the issue that's going to drive you, no bridge, no water, no broadband, none of that is going to matter.
Gotcha. Congressman, we have a few minutes left. I want to ask you about just some disturbing activity that's been happening up in the Congress recently when we were talking about, you mentioned Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who tweeted out the contact information for those 13 Republicans who voted for the infrastructure bill. They joined Democrats with that bill. It's also been 10 months since the attack on the Capitol. You were there. You were shuffled out of the Capitol during that situation. Now you have a colleague up there, Paul Gosar, who's tweeting out videos of members being attacked, killed, even the president being assaulted in this video that's been tweeted out and viewed millions of times. What's going on up in Congress right now? What's being done to stop this kind of activity before it gets even more dangerous than it already is?
We in the Congress can't stop it. It has to be stopped by the voters. And I would hope that the voters in Gosar State will reject him, but I don't think they will. For some strange reason, people seem to be comfortable with the big lies. There's the big lie floating around about the elections last year. and people are voting for the guy who's spreading the big lie. Gosar is doing what he thinks will attract basic Republican voters. And it's time for the Republicans of goodwill. Martin Luther King used to tell us, he told us in his letter from the Birmingham City Jail, that he thought that the people of ill will in our society was making a much better use of time than the people of goodwill. The only way we're going to stop this is for the good people of goodwill in our society to stop voting for these crazy people and stop in the name of partisan politics. Let's think about the country. Do we want an autocracy, or do we want to do what is necessary to further this democracy? We are in pursuit of a more perfect union, but you aren't going to do that by destroying the union. And that's what they're doing.
How big of a threat do you feel like that is to national security?
Well, you know, I can only go on history, and I think it's a great big threat to national security. I said to a neighbor of mine who sent me a text asking me about some foolishness that's out there on the internet, and I asked him, well, I really told him that the people of Germany had no warning. You do. You got a warning. So if you want an autocracy, keep reading that foolishness and reacting to it. If you want a democracy to continue to move forward, then why don't you join the people of goodwill? How can there be any goodwill in a guy that's tweeting about murdering somebody on the floor of the House of Representatives? That ain't no good by anybody's stretch of the imagination.
And Congressman Clyburn, we have 30 seconds left, and I have a big question for you. But what do the next few weeks hold for the Congress? We're talking about the Build Back Better plan, that $1.85 trillion social safety net bill with climate change funding. And then also you have to look at funding the government, keeping it going, and then also the debt ceiling raise. How's this all going to play out in the next few weeks?
Well, let me tell you something about the Build Back Better program. The Build Back Better program is talking about continuing. Remember, $65 billion is only 2/3 of what we need to build out in broadband. South Carolina's in a good place, and a lot of other states aren't. So they need Build Back Better. The child tax credit law comes to an end December 31st. We need to continue that for another year. That's in Build Back Better. South Carolina is one of the 12 states that did not expand Medicaid. We got 200,000 people in South Carolina with no health care at all. Build Back Better has health care in there for those people who are Medicaid eligible to get health care. I don't know how much it's going to cost. So I would hope that people will stop describing the bill by how much it costs and talk about the bill by how much it does.
So a lot to watch along with that and the debt ceiling and the spending going forward. This next few weeks will be very busy for you, I'm sure. We appreciate catching up with you, sir.
Absolutely.
That's House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn.
Thank you
So much. Joining me now to discuss climate change and the United Nations Climate Change Conference is Dr. Lori Zulkowski. She's an Earth Sciences professor at the University of South Carolina. Dr. Zulkowski, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so Dr. Z, let's just talk about this the United Nations Climate Change Conference to start off, because that's been dominating the news for the past 2 weeks. The UN has been working to combat climate change since the 90s. We're talking about the Kyoto Protocol, Paris, now we're talking about Glasgow. And we keep talking about these different ways to limit emissions and therefore limiting the warming of the planet. We're talking about 1.5 degrees Celsius, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be a target that we can actually meet. It sounds like more like 2.7 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. If that's the case, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about those commitments, but what happens at that point? How big of a deal is that at that point?
Well, I think even just starting today, where we are, we've so far warmed by about 1.1 degrees Celsius. And so when we talk about 1.5 or 2.7, that's just going to be amplifying what we're already seeing. We know that we're already having more drought in certain places, more rain in other places. We're having higher sea level, which is causing sunny day flooding, say in Charleston. And so there's wildfires out west. There's lots of things that are starting to happen today when we haven't even been to the targets that we're trying to get to. So all of those damages are going to be happening with more intensity as we get even hotter. So there's lots of work to be done. And these political commitments in terms of what are being discussed are an important aspect to get us to being serious about our targets.
And when we talk about this, do you think we are getting more serious? I mean, if you track the way we've been talking about this over the decades, do you think we've gotten now to a point where we're taking this more seriously?
I think that there was something pretty pivotal that happened yesterday at the Glasgow Agreement in terms of the term fossil fuels was actually the first time ever used in a commitment in terms of talking about phasing out coal. Before, we've always talked around the aspect of what was causing the warming and saying we have to decrease carbon emissions, but without really calling it the fossil fuel problem. So I'm optimistic that we're starting to take it more seriously. However, I will note, up until now, we haven't tracked with every single one of these agreements. We haven't had a global decrease in carbon emissions. So there's still lots of work to be done.
Is that just because it takes time to catch up with these commitments, or what's the catch there?
I think there's lots of factors. There's who's making the commitments at these meetings. It's usually politicians, but who's doing the work to make these reductions in emissions, and are the right people getting the right resources to make it happen? And so I think that there's a huge system that needs to be changed, and it's going to take a lot of work. And so I'm optimistic that there's more resources being put into it now today, especially with the infrastructure bill, and that will help with reducing emissions in the future.
And we can also talk about the other Build Back Better plan too, with a lot of money there for combating climate change. But I want to keep with Glasgow for a moment. President Biden did announce last week about a new proposed rule to cut back on methane emissions. And I didn't really know how bad methane really was until you read up on it. It's about 80 times, it heats the atmosphere 80 times faster than carbon dioxide in the short term. So tell me a little bit about how big of a deal this is when it comes to committing to, really cracking down on regulating these methane emissions in the country.
So methane, it doesn't last in the atmosphere as long as carbon dioxide. So if we stop emitting now for the methane, that means we will bank in some cooling as we figure out how to do reductions in carbon dioxide emissions. And so this is a really important factor. We emit a lot of methane in how we're extracting natural gas right now, and that's not really well regulated. So that is something that we could do a lot better on. So this is a great short-term gap, but that still means we need to start working on the carbon dioxide emissions as we go further.
And then in August, we also heard him talk about, pushing automakers to really move towards electric vehicles by 2030, asking to have about half the cars sold in the country be electric by 2030. Do you see that also as being a big way to, obviously get rid of these carbon dioxide emissions, even though they'll be relying on the electrical grid, which needs work there too, and is now becoming more and more natural gas, but natural gas is not as bad as, coal-fired plants as well?
Yeah, well, just even thinking about the United States, we've decreased our carbon emissions since its peak in 2005. And most of that is because we transitioned from coal-powered plants to natural gas-powered plants. And so that has helped. It wasn't policy what happened, it was economics, sorry. And what we need to do essentially is a parallel path where we need to be working on the transportation aspect and electrifying transportation, but at the same time upgrading the grid. And so that's a lot of what was in the infrastructure bill actually, is working on both increasing the grid's resiliency, working on renewables, but also creating the infrastructure for electric vehicles, because we don't have that across the nation right now. And that will really help, because the groundwork for that was put in the infrastructure bill.
And then I know we have about a couple minutes left, but we're expecting a vote next week in Congress with the Build Back Better plan, which is that $1.85 trillion social safety net and climate change plan to really combat what's going on in the country. Talk about $500 billion for climate change. You're talking about tax incentives. You're talking about businesses being motivated by the money here. Do you think that's going to be a big way to get people on board with actually making some big differences going forward?
Oh, totally. People love carrots. And so in terms of if there's going to be something that will help people be more incentivized to do better, because talking to people about why things aren't happening right now, often it's the economics. And so if we can get rid of those economic barriers and make it such that they are able to see it as more advantageous, that will help a lot. I will note, though, in terms of if for some reason that the Build Back Better bill doesn't make it through, what happened within the infrastructure bill, well, it doesn't have all those policies for it in terms of reductions of carbon emissions, whatnot. Biden had a goal of 50% carbon reductions by 2030, so 50% by 2030, and the infrastructure bill decreases the emissions by about 30%. So it didn't get us all the way there, but it was a good start if only one of the bills passed. So it won't be horrible if only one passed, but it'll be super great, and it'll be really inspirational if both bills pass.
So a lot of things moving there on the national level, but at the state level, I want to ask you just what we're seeing when it comes to climate change. I mean, it's all around us too. Can you point to some examples, whether it's intense hurricanes or flooding, that we've seen increase over the years?
Well, we know that the hurricanes are becoming more intense more quickly because they gain their energy from storms. Sorry, they gain their energy from warmer ocean. So if you have warmer ocean temperature, the hurricanes are going to become more intense. And then when you couple that with higher sea level in terms of what the sea level is, that will mean you're going to have more storm surge. We're starting to see that there's less real estate appreciation in the coastal areas, so that's going to have some impacts on citizens. And then we're seeing changes over time about when the rainfall is occurring. And this might not seem like that big of a deal for the average person, but if we start looking at who's doing the agriculture work in South Carolina, that commercial farmers who have the irrigation, they can sustain their crops over the summer because they have the irrigation, whereas the smaller farms can't because we're getting most of the rainfall in the fall. And we know that in terms of the floods that we saw in 2015, that the intense rainfall is typically happening in the fall.
Mm-hmm. And then really quickly, Doctor, anything to deal with, words of encouragement? I know a lot of people are worried about out there when it comes to climate change. What are your thoughts on the long term?
In the long term, just ask your politicians to be accountable. What are they doing? How are they helping you on this front? Because I think that is really where we need the pressure to be at this point.
Very good. That's Dr. Lori Zolkowski. She's an Earth Sciences professor at the University of South Carolina. Thank you, Dr. Z.
Thank you.
For South Carolina ETV, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.